Welcome to our latest edition of CharitEpulse, our bi-weekly charity podcast. My name is Charles Mosquito, Charities Director at Quilter Cheviot Investment Management. I'm delighted to be joined by my regular musketeers, Catherine Rostomji, leading charity Legal Beagle at Shakespeare Martineau, and James Saunders, charity partner at leading accountancy and audit practice Moore Kingston Smith. Together, we explore the latest pressing issues affecting the not-for-profit sector and voluntary organisations. Don't forget, you can catch us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and on our various websites. We'd love to have some feedback, so please send us comments and questions. Now, it's been another very busy few weeks since we last met. And Catherine, I'm going to come to you first because I happen to be at a charities conference in Leeds on Tuesday, and not you, but another lawyer, pointed out that Companies House is changing from being a register to a regulator. And I have to say, I was a bit bemused about what that would mean for charities.
And isn't it funny? Because I was a bit bemused thinking, I know we've got to try and make charity law that can be dry and slightly dull for some, more interesting, but I did think this was slightly overhyped the reality. So having gone through this new process at Companies House, every company director has to submit their details, they have to register, and when you finally get through the process, you're given a string of letters and numbers, and that's your magic code. And that confirms who you are for every company that you are a director of. So it applies, yes, for charitable companies, but it also applies for other non-charitable companies. So there is that update generally at Companies House. I think in some respects, I think it's been overhyped. I think it was slightly frustrating because obviously you get lots and lots of reminders from Companies House. This is happening, you must do it. So everybody logs on and tries to do it and the system crashes and says, come back later, can't cope. But eventually you get through it. But I would say it's just more, I think it's what we're expecting really. It's more joined up, verifying your ID, being clear about the way people have registered their names. I think the Charity Commission did this some time ago, whether I would be C. Rostomji, CEM Rostomji, Catherine Rostomji, it couldn't tell that that's the same person unless you're updating it. So I just saw it as a housekeeping, tidying up, nothing to be afraid of. And it wasn't that bad once the system worked.
Yeah, I have to say, having a triple-barreled name as I do, I will need to make sure that I use my full name on this. Fun enough, I've had for one of the charities I'm, in fact, chair of trustees. We've been sent an email by our finance director saying, please go on. It's going to take you 30 minutes to complete. I think you've got to upload your passport onto the system.
Very clever. Tells you to hover your phone over it, just says move, and it directs you. So clever. Yeah.
So did you do it on your phone?
I was on screen, and then you scan, you have your passport in front of you, and you just kind of move your phone over it.
But actually, if you just do it once and then it links you into everything else, that would, I have to say, would be an absolute godsend. Anyway, it's something that people should be aware of. We've been given a deadline of the 15th of December. I suspect that we all need to do it, and if we don't do it, we're going to have a problem.
Yeah.
But it only applies to those charities that are companies. And have to supply information to Companies House. But I thought it was an interesting thing. The next thing I came across, James, SORP. We have a new one. It's been published, I believe.
We do. It has been published. It has been a short process from start to finish, really, in terms of when the consultation started to now. So I know there's been some consternation about what was suggested in the consultation hasn't really been taken on board, and there's not much been updated, from the original consultation proposals. So there's nothing too surprising in there. I don't think there's nothing that hasn't been trailed or what's the current phrase? Kite flying. There hasn't been anything that hasn't been particularly well trailed. There is this new 3-tier type approach, 3 tiers of income to ensure proportionate reporting. So that's been something we've talked about before. Charles, and there's that argument between, as it says, proportionate reporting according to size versus, look, everyone should be held to the same standard. So there's that to consider. There are the big changes that we knew about income recognition, bringing that more in line with international standards, or trying to, bearing in mind the charities have the nuanced elements of income reporting, and leases coming on balance sheet as well, operating leases where they wouldn't have been included as assets before. So they're two of the big ones. And then there's other movements around reserves, social investments, going concern, reporting on volunteers, those sort of things. I mean, we're not going to cover everything in a couple of minutes here, and I would suggest to you that there will be any number of webinars, seminars, updates coming out over the course of the next few weeks and months. Bearing in mind, this applies to charities from the 1st of January 2026, so a month and a half away. So the first year ends that are impacted are 31st December 2026. So if you've got a December year end, that your next set of accounts after these ones have been completed for December 25 are going to be under the new SORP.
Well, and also there's been, I think, some change in audit thresholds as well, hasn't there?
There has, yes. So they came through as well at this. It's all of this came through on the same weekend. It's amazing how they managed to, coordinate everything: the charity SORP, the change in thresholds, the update to the governance code, the release of the fund, all in the same weekend. Amazing, big news weekend. But yes, the thresholds for producing accrual accounts in the first place was at 250,000. It's going up to 500,000, and that matches the lowest SORP tier level. So there is some coordination there. The audit threshold, probably the biggest one, the audit threshold is going up from £1 million income to 1.5 million income. So that's gone up by 50% in effect, which is, I suppose, a big rise in percentage terms. But of course, these days, that's, as we said, that's not an awful lot of money in the grand scheme of things. And really, if you're around that threshold and have been around the £1 million for some time, then I suppose it might have some impact. I don't think it's going to bring too many more in. If anything, it'll be bringing people out. The independent examination threshold rises from 25,000, which has been for a long time, to 40,000, which is a funny figure, but there you go. It's £40,000 income now for an independent examination. And the threshold for those independent exams where the independent examiner has to be qualified, have an accounting qualification, has gone up to 500,000 from 250,000. But the two big numbers there, 1.5 million for the audit threshold, and the independent exam's gone up to 40,000.
And this is just for charities in England and Wales, isn't it? Because we have a bit of an inconsistency with Northern Ireland and Scotland, which I always find a bit bizarre.
They've got their own regulators, so yes, they set the rules, and hopefully they'll try and keep in line. But there's obviously,
but they haven't historically been in line.
There's always nuances for various reasons. Yeah,
I just think how to confuse the general public. Catherine, we were at a lunch, weren't we, earlier this week, where we had Dr. Claire Mills, who's the Joint Chief Executive and Head of Policy at CFG, what were your takeaways from that lunch, where we were talking about the role of umbrella bodies, but also the other thing that was touched on, wasn't it, was the quality of independent examinations?
Yeah, it was. And there was a bit of James, I don't know whether you would agree with this or not. So there was some discussion about whether independent examiners are being thorough enough and whether it's worth an independent examination. And some grant funders there were saying they'd rather see an audit and they'd be happy to pay for an audit because it gives more information. Whereas actually, I know I've spoken to accountants that do carry out independent examination, and they say there is still a lot of work involved in doing an independent examination.
Look, this is one of my bugbears. Independent exams done shoddily is rubbish and completely demeans the requirements and demeans the work. There is independent examiner guidance from the Charity Commission, which is extensive and is not something that you can, someone can whiz off on a pro bono basis, oh, I'll just do you a favor and sign an independent examiner's report. If anyone's looking at independent examiners work like that, on either side, on those seeking an independent examination or those carrying it out, it's highly misguided and it's irresponsible, to be honest with you. You should not be looking at an independent exam going, well, it's just a light touch review. That's terrible. It's got to be a good thorough review. Okay, it's not up to the demanding standards of the audits, but it is a proper regulated examination, and it should be treated as such on both sides. And it does cost some money. Any pro bono independent examinations, I think, is frankly unethical, because it just simply should not be something that you can do for free. If it's that, it's not a proper examination, is it? I'm sorry, I feel quite strongly about this, because either you do these things properly or you don't bother.
Yeah. And there is that expectation, I think, on both sides, as you say. I think sometimes charities are their own worst enemies, trying to find somebody that'll do it for free, or 200 quid, just sign here. That's not an examination. I think the clue is in the title. But actually, when it's done well, and many do, independent examination does have its place, and then you don't have to go through the onerous audit threshold and provisions if that's not applicable to your charity.
Yeah, I have clients who are frightened of dropping down into the independent examination regime out of audit, because they say, well, I don't, are our funders going to think we've had a proper examination or not? That should not be a discussion to have. It simply should not be that way. The fact is, it should be seen as what it is, which is still a thorough examination that people can rely on.
But I think that's the point, isn't it? I think the problem from a trustee's point of view is that you're very conscious of the costs of doing these exercises. You're conscious of what grant funders are looking for, and it's trying to get some clarity around that. So I think any guidance that the the profession can give around what the differences are between the two and what are the sorts of prices you should pay, and I'm not sure how easy that is to do, would really help. Catherine, that was only part of the conversation. What else did you pick out about the future of umbrella bodies?
It was interesting. I mean, I thought people were very polite, actually, because the question was posed, if you were starting from scratch now, what umbrella bodies would you create in the charity sector? And the number of people said, oh, I'd do exactly what we have now. And it was all I could do. We're not in pantomime season yet to shout rubbish. Because I don't think that's true. I don't think we'd all go, oh, I'd do it exactly as it is now. A big fat lie. But actually, I did find it interesting talking about whenever we hear the voice of the sector, who's the voice of the sector? And some of the umbrella bodies deliberately saying they don't want to be the voice of the sector. And I thought, well, you do have a voice. I think that's a responsibility to have a voice for your umbrella body members. But there was a bit of anecdotal discussion. And I spoke to somebody as I was leaving saying, that is the one thing I'm taking away, was a number of people had said NCVO is the voice of the sector. And I was just absolutely not. And I think many of my clients would say they in no way identify with NCVO. They have no involvement with them. They do not see that they are speaking for charities across the country. And I think there was more of a discussion as well about large charities, and that, their challenges obviously can be different from small to medium charities, and whether some aspects of the sector aren't being as catered for as others, and how do you pitch it and those sorts of things. But it was an interesting discussion, but it was also about whether it's trustees, whether it's the executive, chief executive, finance director, finance officer, and then even your niche groups within that. Everybody wants a niche club, but don't particularly want to pay the price of admission. And then you think, well, people are not going to provide it for you then, because, as we've seen with the Small Charities Coalition, they're no longer here. So if it's not viable, it's not going to be there. And I think, again, there's a bit of a two-way expectation there of what you actually get for your membership and whether it's worth it.
So my takeaways on the thing I thought was interesting, that when we did have two very strong voices in the sector, Sir Stuart Etherington and Stephen Bubb, that surprised me that people weren't particularly complimentary about that, which I sort of thought was. I think there was also, we had some conversation, didn't we, about what the Charity Commission should be doing, and it was certainly acknowledged that they're a regulator, not meant to be the voice of the sector. But on the funding of the umbrella bodies, I do wonder whether their relationship with professional organisations that specialise in helping charities who also do a lot of education and training, there couldn't be a much more greater collaboration and working in partnership rather than them looking at those various organizations of a source of funding, which is a sort of generally, which is an interesting relationship. Anyway, I suspect that'll be a debate that will continue going on. We've had an update on the governance code. Who wants to? Catherine, are you?
We've gone from 7 principles to 8, which is now going to throw me. I'm going to have to update all of my materials. There is a new website that's planned for 2026 that's going to hopefully be more interactive to help charities use it. So still the same premise. It's not a statutory code and it's not a legal requirement to follow it, but it is a tool and it's a useful tool and it's been updated. So yeah, 8 key principles which can lead to 41 high-level outcomes. And if you're desperate to know the 8, it's 1, foundation principle, 2, organizational purpose, 3, leadership, 4, ethics and culture, 5, decision-making, 6, managing resources and risks, 7 is EDI, but the E is equity, not equality. So equity, diversity and inclusion. And 8 is board effectiveness. So I think it's useful, and there's no longer the small charities code and the large charities code. There is one code, but you're able to tailor it depending on what's applicable for your charity. So I thought it was all good stuff. But yeah, we wait and see what people make of it.
So it's the ethics one that's really it's the new entrance, which was left out, wasn't it? The NTVO sort of wrote a sort of an ethics code, didn't they? So that's been now.
Yeah, and ethics had always been in there. I suppose I think sometimes it's how they rejig it and which bits are given more priority now. And I think ethics and culture is often something that charities do feel very strongly about and do lead on. So I think it's good to be able to show that you're doing that well. But I think it's more how it all fits together and often how often I think people are doing these reviews. I think sometimes they're possibly overusing the code. And I don't think that gives you the time to bed in the changes to actually settle down and start doing the governing rather than just constantly be assessing it.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm pleased that they're now down to 1 code rather than 2. I was quite vocal on that side, but I think they need to be careful not to be changing it too frequently. Otherwise, people are just going to lose the will to live, aren't they? James, have you got any thoughts on the governance?
I quite like that they've changed the house diagram, haven't they, Catherine? So it's
I didn't like the change. I liked the pillars. What was that? Pantheon or whatever I liked that, and that was the first thing I saw. Is that it's gone, and I don't like the house.
And it's a bit confusing. One is the bottom, and 2 is the roof, and then they go all over.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's a bit more.
I didn't like the logic, and we've got a little chimney, and the house I didn't love.
I was expecting more about ESG. I have to say, I know it's in there, and there's some extra bits, but I thought given the attention, but perhaps that attention has just faded in the last year or so. So perhaps it's come and gone a little bit. The focus on it. It's in the ethics and the culture side, isn't it? In that section,
Yeah.
But I think we were all quite pleased that it's not revolution, is it? It's evolution. So I think people generally, it's one of the things that seems to go down quite well with the sector, and no one I've spoken to has said anything other than, right, we'll have a good look at it in the next few months, and hopefully we're doing most of what's there, and if we're not, then it'll be a good recommendation if we do need to.
I mean, we're seeing from talking to our charity clients that the ESG element is got less emphasis than it did 4 or 5 years ago, and my suspicion that is much more to do with the finances of the sector and the pressure that they're under, of which and people's minds.
I think there's been a pivot, hasn't there, from ESG as to this word sustainability, and I think that's probably a little bit easier to cope with. It's a little less, it's a little less onerous, and a little more open to what you do and what you can do, rather than necessarily having to focus on these topics that not everyone likes all the time. So I that's quite a good thing, I think. It's just sustainability in general, and it just gives you that lighter touch look at what you're doing without being quite so demanding.
And I think the Commission has been, Catherine, haven't they, much more robust in pushing back and saying, hold on a second here, you can't be doing what you think from a personal basis. You need to be focusing on your beneficiaries. And if you implement something, you've got to have evidence that you can prove that that is the right thing for the organization. You can't just sort of say, well, we think our beneficiaries wouldn't like this or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's good because there has been an element where it's who shouts the loudest or who thinks they're the most opinionated on something, and that can't be the case. So I think that's been useful to see that consistently said. Yeah.
Yeah. James, we've got a budget coming up shortly. What are the rumours you're hearing?
Well, what have you heard this morning? What have you heard in the last couple of hours? I mean, it's a Friday in November. We've been through various iterations of income tax changes proposed by the Chancellor and the government to the Office of Budget Responsibility. There's been some to and fro's this week that we're in right now, and the picture's changed again. I mean, it seems unlikely there's going to be anything other than some tax rises in there somewhere, which are going to go down like a lead balloon. And some nuances around various sectors being hit again. I mean, it seems no one's out of the crosshairs. You know, the government has taken from pensioners, students, all various sectors, or various groups of people in the last 18 months. There's going to be more because clearly the performance of the country's GDP and the performance at the moment is staggeringly poor. 0.12 improvement in productivity this last month. It's kind of depressing, really, that we can't get out of this hole. Someone said to me a couple of days ago, we've been, when all said and done, we've been in recession for a year. It's just that the stats don't quite reflect it, but there's been nothing. It's not going to be good news on the 26th of November, I don't think, for anyone.
Well, they've certainly flown lots of kites over the last month
absolutely,
or so,
yeah.
Which I'm not sure is a very good way.
Again, I was talking to another
defining policy, but
I was talking to a sector representative body a few days ago, and they said this kite flying has become so commonplace now in the last few years, really. And this isn't the Labour government; this is the previous Conservative government as well. There are so many ideas floated in the lead up that it's confusion, and there's also the difference. I was listening this morning, the difference between the FT publishing this morning corroborated stories and reports of what's been going on between government and the OBR, and then just general gossip, which has been going on as well. And it's very difficult it's easy to get them conflated, very difficult to see the wood for the trees when all this is going on, and only adds to the confusion. And as we know, the markets hate confusion. These international markets that we are guided by and bound by now, they hate confusion. They want stability, and they're just not getting it at the moment.
Yeah, well, and anyway, Catherine's got a very colourful kite with a big smile on it. Turning to slightly, actually more positive news, which I think we'll sort of finish on. We have a preferred candidate for the chair of the Charity Commission, which is one Julia Unwin, Dame Julia Unwin, who, if approved by the Select Committee, will effectively take up her appointment in January. And I didn't realise she gets paid £62,500 for 2 days a week, which I thought was very good value. Catherine or James, have you come across Julia?
I have, yeah. When she was chief executive of Joseph Rowntree Trust, she's very knowledgeable. When she researches particular areas, which she has done, she's led on different projects and reports and things. I think she's very, very thorough, measured, intelligent. I think she'll be a great addition in that role. I think it will be really useful and good to have that clarity of thought and expression and a clearly identifiable person that will present well. So maybe that will become more of this voice of the sector that some would say is missing at the moment. I think she would be excellent at that.
Yeah, she certainly had a very interesting career, hasn't she? And that when she left university, I think she was working up in Liverpool for the voluntary services up there. She's worked for the Greater London Council. and she's also been a commissioner before, so she is highly qualified. And I certainly, from not that I know her personally, but from what I have seen and heard when she's spoken, she's clearly very bright, very knowledgeable, and has a good understanding of the role of the regulator and the understanding of the sector. So I think she'll be a really good appointment. James, have you come across her?
Well, let's not forget Orlando Fraser got to this point and then was rejected by the select committee and then finally appointed by the government. So there's a few hurdles to cross, presumably.
I don't think, no, I think she is definitely the only candidate, where he was one of three, I think. The interesting thing was that the parting comment from Orlando was he felt that the chair should have a legal background. Catherine, do you think the chair should have a legal background?
No. Maybe I should say yes and it didn't wait like, I don't know, 10,
you
15
should. You might
years
get
and
a
I'll
call
do
for the
it.
job.
Yeah, I know. Maybe it's me. That's what
You'd
they
be highly
No,
qualified.
I don't think.
Very suitable.
Yeah. I'd be to the right of Genghis Khan. I'd be too much. People are like, oh my God, this is dreadful. Yeah.
He should have a legal background. He or she should have a legal background. Charles, why?
Just because of the regulator, a lot of course of what it does is all precedented on the law, isn't it?
I can see that. I have to say, I think it's like, oh gosh, who was being interviewed this week? Someone, and they said either you have to know the stuff yourself, or you have to be able to appoint people who know the stuff and really are on top of things as your deputy. I think it was talking about the BBC Director General post. Okay, no one's going to specialise in everything, but the key elements of that job that you're stepping into, you either have to specialise in it, or you have to be able to appoint a deputy who is absolutely hot on this sort of stuff and can deal with it for you.
But I think we're quite fortunate that we have a very passionate, knowledgeable, and strong chief executive of the Charity Commission. So I think this is just going to end up sort of complementing that. I agree with you. I don't think you need somebody per se. They just need to know when they need to take advice and seek out counsel for that. Anyway, thank you, James. Thank you, Catherine. Say we live in interesting times would be, again, an understatement. Thank you for listening. We would love to hear from you. If you have any questions or would like us to cover any particular topics, please do get in touch. Do share with family and friends. Thank you for listening.